The candles in St. Elias Chapel burned steadily, as if too afraid to flicker in the face of such disgrace. White rose petals lay scattered across the aisle like broken promises. Sarah Lane stood before the altar, clutching her bouquet, unable to feel her fingers, only the cold void where her heart should have been. Her groom, Ethan Cole, flawless in his gray suit, smiling with the confidence of a man who always wins, suddenly leaned toward her. The guests fell silent. The organ went still. "You're nothing," he whispered, his eyes locked on hers, then turned and walked down the aisle, leaving behind a wake of gasps and stunned silence. Sarah didn't realize she'd fallen until her knees hit the marble floor. The bouquet slipped from her hands, the flowers scattering across the tiles. Someone screamed. Someone stood up. But it all sounded distant, muffled, like she was underwater. She heard only her own breath, short, ragged, desperate. Behind her, the priest muttered a prayer. Her bridesmaids rushed toward her, but Sarah saw only one thing: the grand chapel doors closing behind the man who had promised her forever just moments ago. And then, just as the air itself froze with humiliation, the doors burst open again. The sound cracked through the silence like gunfire. Men entered, all in black suits, gloved, moving with deliberate precision. At their head walked a tall, broad-shouldered man with cold gray eyes that betrayed no hesitation. Marcus Reed. He moved slowly, as if he owned not just the chapel but every gaze within it. The priest instinctively stepped back, like a man facing a predator. The guests turned, murmuring, fear rippling through the crowd like smoke. "This wedding," Marcus said, his voice deep and resonant, "is not over. It just changed grooms." The chapel sounded like the sea, waves of gasps, whispers, shuffling feet. Marcus Reed ignored them all. He walked straight toward the altar, toward Sarah Lane, pale, frozen, a statue among the living. He stopped in front of her. Up close, his presence was almost unbearable, the scent of expensive tobacco and leather, the weight of command in every movement. "Stand up," he said quietly. She didn't move. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. Only silent tears traced paths through her ruined makeup. "I said, stand." The tone was still low, but sharper now, an order that rippled through the room. Sarah rose, not by choice but by instinct, something in him erased defiance. When their eyes met, she felt a blade of cold slide beneath her skin. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. A faint smile touched his lips, humorless, precise. "The man who paid for your little fairy tale. And now I've come to collect." He turned slightly, addressing the shocked guests and the trembling priest. "Jonathan Lane, your late father, owed me. Not pennies. Millions. Money he borrowed to save his business, and failed to return." Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. "That's impossible. My father died 3 years ago." "Debts don't die with the debtor," he interrupted, stepping closer. "They simply find a new heir." Someone gasped. The priest crossed himself. A few guests tried to slip toward the exit, but the doors slammed shut with a heavy thud. Marcus's men stood there now, silent sentinels in black. "You have 2 choices, Mississippi Lane," he said, his voice almost gentle. "You surrender everything, the house, the accounts, the last scrap of your father's legacy, and walk away with nothing." He leaned in, his breath brushing her cheek. "Or you surrender yourself." Her heart stopped. What do you mean?" "You become my wife. Today. Here. Now." He said it like a business clause, not a proposal. "The debt is erased. Your family's name stays clean. And under my protection, no one touches you. Sarah stared at him, unable to tell if he was mad or merely ruthless. Why me? Why this? Marcus's mouth curved slightly, the hint of a smile without warmth. Because your father betrayed me once. I don't lose what's mine. A pause. And unlike your runaway groom, I never walk away from what I claim. He straightened, facing the priest. Continue the ceremony. The priest hesitated, pale as the marble floor. Yes, sir, I cannot proceed without the bride's consent. Marcus turned back to Sarah, eyes steady, unblinking. She has it, he said softly. She just hasn't spoken it yet. He leaned close until she could feel the cold weight of his words against her skin. Stand up, Sarah, he whispered. You're mine now. The sentence struck her not as a promise, but as a verdict. Rain hammered against the tinted windows of the car that carried Sarah away from the chapel. Outside, flashes of blue and white lights blinked from a distance, police, reporters, wedding guests. No one dared to cross the cordon of black SUVs that had sealed off the street. The city was already whispering, and her name was on every tongue. Inside, silence reigned. Sarah sat rigid, hands clenched together in her lap, still tasting the salt of her own tears. Her chest ached with the echo of his words, "You're mine now." Every bump in the road made her flinch. Every turn felt like a descent into something she couldn't escape. Marcus Reed sat opposite her, a shadow carved in steel and silence. He didn't look at her once, only at his phone, the soft light painting his face in fragments. Even then, power clung to him like a second skin. When the car finally slowed, iron gates opened soundlessly ahead. Beyond them stretched an estate that looked more fortress than home. Cameras followed their arrival, red lights blinking like watchful eyes. Men in dark suits stood beneath the rain, motionless, waiting. The mansion loomed on the hill outside Newport, white stone, high windows, and the ocean roaring far below. Sarah's breath caught. It was magnificent and merciless. Inside, everything gleamed, polished marble floors, chandeliers scattering fractured light, paintings of men who all looked like they'd won their battles and lost their souls. Power lived in these walls, it breathed in the silence. A tall man in a charcoal suit appeared as they entered. David Cross, Marcus said. My advisor. David's eyes flicked to her, polite, but edged with suspicion. So this is the bride, he said, and the word bride sounded more like liability. Marcus didn't react. She stays here. East Wing. 2 guards on rotation. Sarah found her voice, though it trembled. You can't just keep me here. He looked at her then, really looked. And in that moment, beneath the control, there was something raw, not pity, but understanding. I didn't take you, Sarah, he said quietly. You chose survival. There's a difference. Before she could answer, David stepped closer. Marcus, bringing her here the same night a warehouse deal goes bad isn't wise. If she's tied to the lanes, she's tied to risk. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's my concern, not yours. The warning in his tone made David step back immediately. Sarah barely heard them. Her thoughts were a blur, her father, her brother Ryan, her ruined life, the cage around her. The maid who led her upstairs avoided her gaze, silent as a ghost. The bedroom waiting for her was beautiful, silk curtains, ocean view, and a bed so soft it felt unreal. When the door closed, the silence roared. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone else, pale skin, torn gown, eyes wide with disbelief. Then a voice came through the intercom near the bed, calm, commanding, unmistakable. Don't try the gates. Don't call anyone. For now, the safest place in this world is here. His tone wasn't cruel, just final, the kind of voice that never had to raise itself to be obeyed. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the storm crashing against the cliffs below. The wind rattled the windows, but the walls didn't move. This wasn't a home. It was a prison gilded with wealth, guarded by fear. For the first time since the altar, she spoke without trembling, only disbelief. "What are you, Marcus Reed?" No one answered. Only thunder rolled in reply, deep, distant, and endless. Days began to blend together, each one so quiet it felt unreal. Inside Marcus Reed's mansion, time didn't move, it repeated. Guards changed shifts at exact hours, the ocean rumbled below the cliffs, and the same cold light filled every corridor. Sarah didn't adapt, she simply learned to exist. Like a bird that stops fighting its cage, she found a rhythm in survival. The walls stopped feeling foreign, but freedom never felt further away. She saw Marcus most mornings at breakfast. Their exchanges were brief, formal, his voice always calm, precise, detached. Sometimes he asked about her brother, her mother, the past. She answered carefully, never too much, sensing that every word might weigh against her. Still, she couldn't ignore the strange familiarity between them, two people surrounded by silence, both prisoners of their own kind of cage. One evening, restless, Sarah wandered into the library. The fire was burning low, casting amber light across the shelves. Marcus sat alone, sleeves rolled, a glass of red wine in his hand, the collar of his shirt undone, a rare crack in his armor. He didn't turn at first. "Can't sleep?" His voice was rough, low, almost human. "Too quiet," she said, approaching the window. "Sometimes I think the silence in this house is alive. It listens." A faint smile. "That's not silence. That's fear. People here have learned to breathe softly so they don't remind themselves where they are." He poured a second glass and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting touch that left her pulse unsteady. "I didn't ask to be part of this," Sarah said. "But now that I am, I need to understand. Who are you, really?" Marcus looked at her over the rim of his glass. "A man who's traded peace for control," he said simply. Then, softer. "Peace is a luxury I haven't been able to afford for a long time." It wasn't confession, it was an accident of honesty. And it unsettled her more than any threat could. After a moment, Sarah said quietly, "Your advisor." "David Cross." "He doesn't trust me." "He doesn't trust anyone," Marcus replied. "That's both his skill and his flaw." She hesitated. "Sometimes I hear him talking on the phone. He mentioned my brother's name once. Ryan. I don't know if it meant anything, but it scared me." Marcus set the glass down. His gaze was steady, unreadable. "When was this?" "Last night." "I didn't want to listen, but," she paused. "I'm afraid for him." The fire cracked softly. Marcus leaned back, studying her face as if weighing how much of her fear was truth. "Your brother is a grown man," he said finally. "If he's involved with the wrong people, he'll have to live, or die, with that choice." "You speak of death like it's a business term," she murmured. "In my world," he said, "it is." They fell into silence. The air between them shifted, not hostile now, but fragile, uncertain. "If I find out Ryan's tied to my enemies," Marcus began. "Tell me first," Sarah interrupted. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "I deserve to know before anyone else does." He tilted his head. You're sure you want the truth, even if it destroys what little you have left? I already live among ruins, she whispered. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then rose. He came closer, close enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath, the faint scent of smoke and wine. Sometimes, Sarah, he said quietly, fear is the only thing that keeps us sane. And sometimes, she answered, it's the thing that drives us mad. He smiled then, not cold, not cruel, but real. Careful. In my house, words like that can sound like a challenge. Then take it as one, she said. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then he turned away, voice soft but final. Get some sleep. Tomorrow may be a long day. That night, sleep didn't come. She sat by the window, staring at the restless sea below. She was still a prisoner, but no longer silent. Even in this cage, she'd learned she could still move, still choose, still fight. Somewhere in the dark, a phone rang. A door opened. Footsteps echoed down the marble corridor. Sarah pressed her palm to the cold glass, watching as a servant hurried toward Marcus's study. She couldn't make out the words, but the tension in the man's shoulders said enough. Outside, the wind shifted, and with it came the faint, unmistakable scent of smoke. The fire could be seen even from the cliffs. Smoke rolled over the ocean, turning the air bitter with salt and ash. On the mansion's security screens, the warehouse burned like a scar carved into the night. The cameras went offline 11 minutes before the explosion, the technician reported. Access code used, Ryan Lane. Sarah froze. Her brother's name cracked through the room like a shot. David Cross stood beside Marcus, his face pale but composed, almost satisfied. Well, he said, that explains everything. The only question is how you plan to handle it. Marcus didn't look away from the screens. First we verify. Verify? David's tone sharpened. Someone blew up your property using her brother's code. This isn't an error, it's betrayal. Sarah's voice cut through the static. He didn't do this. You know he didn't. I only know what the numbers say, David replied coolly. And numbers don't lie. Marcus finally turned, his expression unreadable. How long will it take you to prove it, Sarah? 24 hours, she said instantly. Just give me that. The silence that followed was heavy as smoke. Marcus nodded once. 24 hours. Starting now. You'll work under supervision, full access to the logs, nothing more. Kane will escort you. He didn't need to add the rest, one mistake, and it's over. The server room was cold enough to sting her skin. Metal hummed around her like a low threat. Without Marcus's explicit permission, she would never have been allowed inside. Every keystroke was monitored, every command logged. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. Access traces. Timestamps. Digital ghosts. Her escort, Kane, stood near the door, silent, impassive, a wall of muscle and obedience. Then a voice broke the stillness. She's wasting time, David said from behind him. If she were innocent, she'd have asked for proof, not access. He sounded calm, but his eyes betrayed irritation, the kind that comes from losing control. Sarah ignored him, focusing on a detail buried deep in the logs. Ryan's code had been used remotely, through an internal proxy, not his own computer. That terminal isn't his, she murmured. It's one of yours. David folded his arms. Convenient theory. Maybe his friends have inside help. Maybe you're the inside help. Kane glanced at him but said nothing. His orders came only from Marcus, and Marcus had said let her work. Sarah opened an old security archive, digging for footage around the time of the explosion. The screen flickered, a flash of light near the warehouse door, a figure moving fast. Left hand entering the code. Ryan was right-handed. Always had been. Her pulse quickened. She zoomed in, the image was grainy, distorted by heat and smoke, but for a split second, she saw the glint of a dark metal cuff or maybe a watch. Square-faced, with a polished edge. Like the one David wore, always over his shirt cuff, where it could catch the light. She forced herself to breathe. Not proof. Not yet. But close. Kane, she said quietly, there's a secondary backup, an offline mirror. No network connection, just raw system data. I need it. Doesn't exist, he said flatly. It does, she insisted. A house like this doesn't survive without cold storage. If it doesn't, you've already lost. Kane hesitated, then called someone, listening in silence. When he hung up, he motioned her to follow. 5 minutes, he said. Then we go back. The cold archive was hidden behind a locked steel door, one lonely machine, humming faintly, forgotten by time. Sarah's fingers trembled as she accessed the drive. Raw data flowed like a river of noise until she found it, a file repacked 8 minutes after the cameras died. Someone had altered the logs. And there, a username. DC_EUX. Her heart hammered. David Cross. What is it? Kane asked. A mismatch in timestamps, she said evenly. Someone inside rewrote the trail under my brother's name. David's voice came from the doorway, smooth as oil. Fascinating. And who would that be? He moved closer, pretending casual curiosity, but his jaw tightened. Be careful, Mississippi Lane. Accusations like that can end careers, or lives. I'm not accusing, she replied. I'm confirming. David smiled faintly, too faintly. You've had your 5 minutes. Before he could reach for the console, Kane stepped between them. Mr. Reed's orders, he said. She finishes what she started. David froze, the smile finally cracking. Sarah inserted a flash drive and copied the file. The recorder beeped softly. A quiet sound, yet it seemed to echo through the whole corridor. On the playback monitor, a blurred corridor came into view. A figure passed by the camera, tall, deliberate, shoulders slightly turned inward. The same smooth, right-shouldered stride she'd seen 100 times in the halls upstairs. Enhance it, David ordered, his voice tighter now. She froze the frame just as a faint reflection caught the light, a square metal watch glinting against the wrist. Not proof. Not yet. But the truth was close enough to burn. Sarah pulled the flash drive free. Behind her, David spoke again, too softly. You won't leave this room with that. Kane shifted, blocking the path. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, footsteps in the hall. Slow. Heavy. Familiar. The door handle turned. The door opened slowly. Marcus Reed stepped inside, alone, framed by the dim light of the hall. He didn't speak at first. His gaze moved across the room, Sarah, pale but steady, Kane, unflinching by the door, David Cross, stiff beside the console, the mask already cracking. Marcus's eyes fell to the flash drive in Sarah's hand. What is that? Her voice trembled, but she held his stare. Proof. Of who really burned your warehouse. David gave a dry laugh. She's bluffing. You'll see. Show me, Marcus said quietly. Sarah slid the drive into the port. The monitor flickered to life, the narrow corridor at the docks, a blurred figure moving toward the side door. Then, a glint of light on a square metal watch. Marcus leaned in, studying the frame with forensic calm. He didn't trust what he saw, he trusted what it meant. When he finally turned to David, his face was unreadable. "Where were you that night?" David didn't blink. "Here. At the estate. You can check the logs." "I did," Marcus said evenly. "They're the same logs you edited." For a second, David's expression faltered, then hardened again. "That could be anyone. You think she didn't doctor that file? Look at her, she's desperate." The silence that followed was more dangerous than shouting. The hum of the servers filled the space like pressure before a storm. Marcus moved closer, his voice low, deliberate. "I trusted you more than anyone. And you sold that trust to my enemies." David's control cracked. "You don't understand. The Russos, they came for me, they." "The Russos don't threaten," Marcus cut in softly. "They buy. And you sold." The words landed like a verdict. David took a step back. "You need me. You don't know what's coming." Marcus didn't answer. His gaze flicked to Kane. Kane reached for his earpiece. Marcus lifted a hand. "No. Not yet." He looked at Sarah then, and for the first time, his eyes softened, just slightly. "You knew," he said. "You could have run. But you stayed. Why?" Her hands were trembling, but she didn't hide them. "Because you were wrong about my brother," she whispered. "And someone had to make you see it." Something shifted behind his calm, a brief, human flicker. "Your father's debt brought you here," he said quietly. "But you've earned your way out yourself." Then, to Kane, "Take him downstairs." David tried to speak, but no sound came. The door shut behind them with a muted thud. Silence returned, thick, humming, alive. Sarah leaned against the console, drained, the glow of the screen painting her face in pale gold. Her voice was barely a breath. "I wasn't looking for power, Marcus. Just the truth." He watched her for a long moment. "Truth is power," he said finally. "Most people just don't survive long enough to use it." Their eyes met, hers still trembling with exhaustion, his shadowed but not cold anymore. For the first time, the distance between them felt less like a wall and more like fragile understanding. Marcus turned to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "you did what my own men couldn't." He hesitated, as if deciding whether to thank her or warn her, and in the end did neither. "Go rest. Tomorrow, the family will want answers." She exhaled, the flash drive still warm in her hand. Outside, the night wind softened, but inside her, the world hadn't stopped burning. A month had passed. New York glimmered like a crown of glass, flawless, fragile, and cold. On the top floor of the Belmont Hotel, the Reed family reception shimmered with polished decadence, men in black suits, women in silver silk, laughter, crystal, champagne. The laughter rang sharp, like glass about to crack. Power never celebrated, it performed. Sarah stood beside Marcus beneath the chandelier's trembling light. The newspapers called it the rebirth of an empire, the new face of the Reeds. To her, it felt less like a celebration, and more like a battlefield disguised as a dance. Marcus lifted his glass. His voice was smooth, calm, perfectly measured, the tone of a man who never revealed more than he chose to. "When I married her, it was business," he said. "But I've learned that loyalty isn't built on contracts." The hall went silent. Then applause, restrained, deliberate, edged with curiosity. All eyes turned to her. Sarah raised her glass. The chandelier's light slid across her bracelet, sharp as a blade. "You told me to stand up," she said softly. "I learned to stay that way." The applause returned, louder now, like the sea coming back to shore. Marcus leaned closer, his voice meant for her alone. "Careful," he murmured. "In this room, belief is more dangerous than truth." She met his gaze, steady, calm. "Then let them believe," she said. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. The chandelier swayed slightly, scattering light across their faces, his composed, hers poised. Two predators. Two survivors. Two people who understood that peace here was only a costume. Outside, the city roared, car horns, wind off the Hudson, the pulse of ambition. Inside, silk rustled, deals were sealed with smiles, and power shifted ever so slightly toward her. Sarah smiled, not as a girl who'd been saved, but as a woman who knew the cost of survival. She was no longer the bride who had fallen, nor the prisoner behind guarded gates. She stood, knowing that one day, someone would try to make her kneel again. But if Sarah Reed ever fell, it would only be to rise higher. Outside, near the service exit, a black car waited with its lights off. Inside, a man sat in darkness, his face lit only by the glow of a phone. He watched a photo from the ballroom, Sarah and Marcus raising their glasses, and smiled the kind of smile that comes before a gunshot. He turned off the screen. "It's time to collect a debt," he said quietly. The city kept shining, unaware that a new storm had already begun. And its first name would be Sarah Reed. Tell us which state you're from and which part you liked the most. Subscribing is the best way to say thanks.